Officer Jake had been a cop for 12 years, and he'd learned to trust his gut. Right now, his gut was screaming that something was about to go terribly wrong. It was a perfect Saturday morning in Springfield, Ohio, the kind of day that made people forget about their problems and remember why they loved their community. Memorial Park was packed with families for the annual Community Safety Day, an event the police department organized every year to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the residents they served. Children's laughter echoed across the sprawling green lawn, mixing with the sizzle of hot dogs on grills and the cheerful melodies from the balloon vendor's cart. Jake stood near the main stage with his K9 partner, Rex, a magnificent German shepherd with a coat of black and tan that gleamed in the morning sun. At 85 pounds of pure muscle and training, Rex was an intimidating presence. His dark, intelligent eyes constantly scanned the environment, missing nothing. For 3 years, Jake and Rex had been inseparable, partners in every sense of the word. They tracked down missing persons, sniffed out hidden narcotics, and even apprehended dangerous suspects together. Rex wasn't just a police dog. He was Jake's best friend, his protector, and the most reliable partner he'd ever had. But Rex had one hard and fast rule. When he was working, he was all business. 15 minutes until showtime, Jake muttered to Rex, checking his watch. The K9 demonstration was scheduled for 10:30 a.m., and already a crowd was gathering around the cordoned-off area where they'd perform. Jake could see the mix of expressions on people's faces, excitement from the kids, curiosity from some adults, and wariness from others. He understood the wariness. Trust between police and community had been strained lately, not just in Springfield but across the entire country. That's why events like this mattered so much. Rex sat perfectly at attention beside Jake, his posture rigid and professional. The dog's ears were perked forward, his body coiled like a spring. This was Rex in work mode, focused, alert, and honestly, a little scary if you didn't know him. Even Jake's fellow officers gave Rex plenty of space when he had that look in his eyes. "Good boy," Jake said softly, running his hand along Rex's back. The dog's tail gave the briefest wag acknowledgement but nothing more. Work first, affection later. That was Rex's code. Around them, the festival was in full swing. The fire department had brought their ladder truck, and kids were taking turns sitting in the driver's seat. The mayor was working a booth selling raffle tickets for a local charity. Food trucks lined the perimeter of the park, their savory smells drifting on the breeze. It was exactly the kind of wholesome, community-building event that Jake had dreamed about when he first became a police officer. Then in an instant, everything changed. A flash of pink caught Jake's peripheral vision. He turned his head just in time to see a tiny girl. She couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, break free from her mother's grasp about 30 yards away. The little girl had hair pulled into 2 bouncing pigtails, and she was wearing a bright pink sundress with white flowers. But what stopped Jake's heart cold wasn't what she was wearing. It was where she was running. Directly toward Rex. "No!" The mother's scream cut through the festive noise like a knife. Jake saw her lunge forward, arms outstretched, trying to grab her daughter. But the little girl was fast, propelled by the fearless energy that only toddlers possess, and she'd already built up too much momentum. Time seemed to stretch and slow, the way it always did in crisis moments. Jake's training kicked in automatically, his mind rapidly processing the situation and calculating responses. Rex had spotted the girl. Jake felt the dog's entire body tense beneath his hand, every muscle going rigid. The German shepherd's head lowered slightly, his eyes locked onto the approaching target. This was exactly what Rex had been trained to do: identify potential threats, assess movement, prepare to respond. But Rex had been trained to deal with criminals and suspects, not 3-year-old children in pink dresses. Around them, people were starting to notice. A woman gasped and grabbed her own child, pulling him backward. A man shouted, "Someone stop that kid!" Parents instinctively created a protective circle around their own children, watching the scene unfold with horror-struck faces. The little girl was 20 feet away now, 15 feet, 10 feet. Jake's heart hammered against his. His hand was already moving toward Rex's collar, ready to grab it, ready to pull the dog back if needed. But he couldn't move too quickly or too aggressively. That might trigger Rex's protective instincts even more. "Rex, stay," Jake commanded, his voice firm but not harsh. The dog remained in position, but Jake could feel the coiled tension, like a rubber band stretched to its absolute limit. The mother was running too, but she was too far behind. "Emma," she screamed, pure terror in her voice. "Emma, stop." But Emma, apparently that was her name, showed no signs of stopping. If anything, she seemed to speed up, her little legs pumping as fast as they could carry her. Her face was lit up with pure joy, the kind of unfiltered happiness that only young children can express. She clearly didn't see danger. She saw something that, in her innocent mind, was exciting and wonderful. She saw a dog. 5 feet away now. The crowd had gone almost silent, the festive atmosphere evaporating in the tension of the moment. Jake could hear his own breathing, loud in his ears. Rex's breathing too, controlled, steady, but ready to explode into action at any second. 3 feet. Jake's muscles tensed, ready to intervene. He'd worked with Rex long enough to read the dog's body language fluently, and right now, Rex was in full alert mode. The German Shepherd wasn't growling, that was good, but he wasn't relaxed either. This was uncharted territory. Rex had been approached by adults before, by other officers, by handlers at the training facility, but never by a charging toddler who had no concept of boundaries or danger. 2 feet. Emma's mother was screaming continuously now, words tumbling over each other in panic. "Please, someone grab her, oh God, please." 1 foot. And then Emma stopped, her little shoes skidding slightly on the grass. She was so close that Jake could see the sprinkle of freckles across her nose, the gap where she'd lost one of her baby teeth, the pure and absolute fearlessness in her bright blue eyes. The entire crowd held its breath. Jake's hand hovered near Rex's collar, ready to grab, ready to protect both his partner and this child from whatever was about to happen next. Rex's ears, which had been pinned back in alert mode, twitched forward slightly. His intense brown eyes stared directly into Emma's blue ones. For a moment that felt like an eternity, the seasoned police dog and the fearless toddler simply looked at each other. And then Emma smiled, the biggest, most genuine smile Jake had ever witnessed, and opened her mouth to speak. Emma's smile was radiant, the kind of pure, unfiltered joy that adults spend their whole lives trying to recapture. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement as she stood face to face with Rex, completely oblivious to the panic she'd caused. She looked at the massive German Shepherd the way other children might look at a birthday present wrapped in shiny paper. Jake's fingers were inches from Rex's collar, his entire body coiled and ready to intervene. Every instinct screamed at him to grab the dog, to pull Rex back, to create distance between 85 pounds of trained police canine and this tiny, vulnerable child. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way Emma stood there with such absolute confidence, or maybe it was a subtle shift he felt in Rex's posture. Either way, Jake held his position, ready but waiting. Emma's mother, Maria, was still running, her sandals slapping against the grass, her breath coming in desperate gasps. She was maybe 10 feet away now, close enough to see every terrible possibility playing out in her mind, close enough to imagine her daughter being bitten, attacked, hurt. The terror in her eyes was raw and primal, the fear every parent knows but hopes never to experience. The crowd had formed a loose semicircle around the unfolding scene, every person frozen in place like statues in a garden. A teenage boy had his phone out, recording, though his hand was shaking so badly the video would probably be unwatchable. An elderly man had removed his baseball cap and was clutching it to his chest, his lips moving in what might have been a prayer. 2 uniformed officers who'd been manning the recruitment booth were running over, but they were too far away to do anything but watch. Rex's ears twitched forward, then back, then forward again, a sign of confusion that Jake had never seen from his partner before. The dog's tail, which had been stiff and still, quivered slightly at the tip. His dark eyes remained locked on Emma's, but something in his expression was changing. The rigid alertness was softening, the coiled tension unwinding degree by degree. Emma tilted her head to one side, studying Rex with the intense focus that children bring to things that fascinate them. She seemed to be making a decision, her little forehead wrinkling in concentration. Then, as naturally as breathing, she spoke. "Hi, friend." 2 words. 2 simple, ordinary words that people said 100 times a day without thinking. But in that moment, in that precise configuration of time and space and circumstance, those 2 words carried the weight of magic. The effect on Rex was immediate and stunning. The German Shepherd's entire body language transformed as if someone had flipped a switch. His ears, which had been moving uncertainly, suddenly relaxed completely, rotating forward in the universal dog signal of friendly interest. His mouth, which had been closed in a tight line, opened slightly, his tongue appearing as he began to pant softly. And his tail began to wag. It started slowly, just a gentle sway from side to side, as if Rex himself couldn't quite believe what he was doing. Then it gained momentum, sweeping back and forth with increasing enthusiasm. Within seconds, the fierce police dog who'd been on high alert was wagging his tail like an excited puppy meeting a new friend at the park. Jake's jaw literally dropped. He'd worked with Rex for 3 years, had seen him in training sessions, on patrol, in high-stress situations, and during downtime. He thought he knew every facet of his partner's personality, but he had never, not once, seen Rex respond to a stranger like this, especially not while he was in work mode, wearing his official police vest on duty at a public event. Emma giggled, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze, and clapped her tiny hands together with delight. "You're wagging," she announced, as if Rex had just performed an incredible trick. "You're a happy doggy." Rex's tail wagged even harder. Maria finally reached them, stumbling to a stop beside her daughter. She was breathing so hard she could barely speak, her hand pressed against her chest, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and residual terror. "Emma, sweetie, you can't just—" She stopped mid-sentence, finally processing what she was actually seeing. Her daughter and the police dog weren't in a standoff. They were bonding. Jake found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "It's okay," he said quickly, wanting to reassure Emma's mother before she pulled her daughter away. I've never seen him do this before, but he's clearly okay with her." Emma, completely unconcerned with the adult conversation happening above her head, took another step closer to Rex. She was now standing directly in front of him, so close that the dog's breath ruffled the wispy hairs escaping from her pigtails. Slowly, with the careful deliberation of a child who'd been taught to be gentle with animals, Emma reached out her right hand. The crowd collectively held its breath again. Even with Rex's friendly body language, this was still a working police dog, still an animal with teeth and instincts and the capacity to react unpredictably. Maria made a small sound in the back of her throat, a whimper of renewed fear, but she didn't move to stop her daughter. Maybe she was frozen. Maybe she sensed, as Jake did, that something extraordinary was happening and interference might break the spell. Emma's small hand, with its pudgy fingers and the remains of what looked like purple marker on her palm, extended toward Rex's face. She was aiming for his nose, that wet, black button at the end of his snout. Time seemed to slow again as her hand crossed the final inches of distance. Then, with the gentlest touch imaginable, Emma's index finger made contact with Rex's nose. "Boop," she whispered, a smile spreading across her face. Rex's response was nothing short of miraculous. The powerful German Shepherd, trained to chase down suspects and search buildings for hidden threats, lowered his head submissively and leaned into Emma's touch. His eyes, which could look fierce and intimidating, softened into pools of liquid warmth. A small, contented sound emerged from his throat, not quite a whine, not quite a groan, but something in between that sounded suspiciously like happiness. Emma squealed with joy and threw her arms around Rex's neck, hugging him with the fierce, unself-conscious affection that only small children can give. And Rex, incredible, professional, all-business Rex, not only tolerated the hug but seemed to melt into it. He curved his neck around slightly, almost as if he were hugging her back. "Oh my God," someone in the crowd whispered. "Are you seeing this?" another voice asked. "I'm recording," a third person called out. "This is incredible." Jake looked down at his partner and felt his eyes sting with unexpected emotion. In 12 years of police work, he'd seen a lot of things. He'd seen tragedy and heroism, desperation and hope, the worst of humanity and the best. But he'd never seen anything quite like this. The moment when a trained police K-9 and a fearless 3-year-old girl recognized something fundamental in each other. Trust, connection, pure, uncomplicated friendship. Maria slowly sank to her knees beside her daughter, one hand covering her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face, though Jake couldn't tell if they were tears of relief, joy, or some complicated mixture of both. "Emma, baby," she said softly, her voice shaking. "How did you know he was friendly?" Emma pulled back from her hug just enough to look at her mother with an expression of perfect, childlike wisdom. "I didn't know, Mama," she said simply. "I just said hi." Rex's tail continued to wag, thumping against Jake's leg with rhythmic enthusiasm. The dog looked up at his handler with an expression that Jake could only describe as blissful. It was as if Rex was saying, "Can we keep her? Please, can we keep her?" The crowd began to applaud tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. The tension that had gripped Memorial Park for those endless seconds finally broke, releasing in a wave of relief and wonder. People were smiling, laughing, wiping their eyes. The teenage boy with the phone was grinning so wide his face looked like it might split. The elderly man had replaced his baseball cap and was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Jake knelt down beside Emma and Rex, completing the circle. "Hi there," he said to Emma, his voice gentle. "I'm Officer Jake. This is my partner, Rex. You're a very brave girl." Emma beamed at him. "He's my friend now," she declared with the absolute certainty that only a 3-year-old could possess. Jake looked at Rex, who was still gazing at Emma with devoted attention, his tail still wagging. Then he looked at Maria, who was watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and lingering anxiety. Finally, he looked back at Emma and smiled. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think you might be right about that." Nobody in Memorial Park that morning knew it yet, but those 2 words, "hi, friend," had just changed everything. By the time Maria got Emma home from Memorial Park that Saturday afternoon, her phone had already started buzzing. Text messages from friends, notifications from Facebook, a voicemail from her sister in Texas who somehow already knew what had happened. Maria was still processing the morning's events, her heart still racing every time she replayed that terrifying moment when Emma had run toward the police dog, and she couldn't understand why everyone was suddenly contacting her. "Mama, can we see Rex tomorrow?" Emma asked from her car seat, swinging her legs contentedly. She talked about nothing else for the entire drive home. "Rex is my best friend now. Can he come to my birthday party?" "We'll see, sweetie," Maria replied absently, pulling into their apartment complex parking lot. Her phone buzzed again, then 3 times in rapid succession. By the time she got Emma inside and settled with her coloring books, Maria had 17 missed calls and 42 text messages. Something was happening, something big, but she couldn't figure out what. Finally, she opened Facebook. The first thing she saw was a video shared by her friend Rachel with the caption, "Maria, is this Emma? OMG." Maria's hand started shaking as she pressed play. There it was, the entire encounter filmed from someone's phone in the crowd. The video quality wasn't perfect. It was a bit shaky and the audio picked up wind noise, but it captured everything. Emma breaking free and running, Maria's scream of terror, the crowd's collective gasp, and then in crystal-clear detail the moment Emma stopped in front of Rex, smiled that radiant smile and said those two words, "Hi, friend." The video showed Rex's transformation, the way his entire demeanor shifted, the tail wagging, the gentle lean into Emma's touch. It captured Emma's delighted giggle and her fearless hug. It even caught the moment when Maria sank to her knees in tears and the crowd's eruption of applause. The video had been posted 3 hours ago. It already had 12,000 views, 800 shares, and hundreds of comments scrolling beneath it. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. That little girl just taught that dog about unconditional love. I'm crying at my desk right now. I think I'm crazy. This is what pure innocence looks like. Faith in humanity, RESTORED." Maria sat down heavily on her couch, still staring at her phone. She'd never had anything go viral before. She'd never even had a post get more than maybe 20 likes. This was surreal. This was overwhelming. This was. Her phone rang, an unknown number with a New York area code. "Hello," Maria answered cautiously. "Hi, is this Maria? This is Jennifer from Good Morning America. We saw the video of your daughter and the police dog, and we'd love to have you both on the show." Maria hung up. Her hands were trembling now. Good Morning America, that couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of prank or scam. Her phone immediately rang again, different number, different area code. "Ms., this is David Park from CNN. We'd like to talk to you about your daughter's incredible moment with." Maria hung up again, her heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. She refreshed Facebook. The video now had 45,000 views. She opened Twitter, she rarely used Twitter, and searched for "girl police dog." The video was everywhere, shared by accounts with millions of followers, each version racking up thousands of retweets. One tweet from a popular motivation account read, "This 3-year-old teaches us more about overcoming fear than any self-help book ever could. 2 words, hi, friend. That's it. That's the whole lesson. Be kind, inspired daily." It had 34,000 likes. Meanwhile, across town at the Springfield Police Department, Officer Jake was experiencing his own version of chaos. "My office, now," Sergeant's voice boomed across the station. Jake had barely walked through the door after the Community Safety Day event. Rex was still in the parking lot in his climate-controlled kennel, probably still processing his own confusing encounter with a 3-year-old girl who'd somehow bypassed all his professional training with pure innocence. Jake walked into his office to find his sergeant staring at a computer screen, along with Captain Williams, the department's public information officer, and Lieutenant from Community Relations. All 3 turned to look at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "Did you know about this?" asked, spinning the monitor around. It was the video, playing on the Springfield PD's Facebook page, where it had apparently been shared by at least 20 different people. The department's social media feed, which usually got maybe 100 likes per post, was exploding with activity. I knew someone was filming," Jake said slowly, "but I didn't think. I mean, it was just a moment. Emma, that's the little girl, she just wanted to pet Rex." "Just a moment," Captain Williams laughed, but it wasn't an unkind laugh. "This video has been viewed over 200,000 times in the last 4 hours. Our phones haven't stopped ringing. We've gotten calls from 3 national news networks, 2 major newspapers, and about 40 local news stations from across the country. The mayor's office just contacted us. They want to do a press conference." Jake felt the floor tilt slightly beneath his feet. "A press conference? About what?" Lieutenant leaned forward, her eyes bright with something that looked like excitement. "About this. About what happened today. Do you realize what you and Rex just did? In a time when police-community relations are at an all-time low, when people are protesting in the streets, when trust is broken in communities across America, Your K9 just had a moment of pure, genuine connection with a 3-year-old girl that's making millions of people smile. This isn't just a cute dog video. This is a symbol. This is hope. By Sunday morning, the video had reached 2 million views across all platforms. News outlets were running the story during their weekend broadcasts. The Springfield Police Department's social media following had quadrupled overnight. The video had been picked up by international news sites, people in London, Tokyo, Sydney, and were watching Emma and Rex's encounter and sharing it with captions in their own languages. Maria's phone hadn't stopped buzzing for 24 hours. She turned off notifications, but the calls kept coming. Her apartment complex neighbors kept knocking on her door, asking if it was true, if Emma was the girl from the video. The building manager had to put a note on the main entrance asking media representatives not to enter without permission. Emma, blissfully unaware of the chaos her 2 words had created, was sitting at the kitchen table eating pancakes shaped like dogs. "Mama," she said through a mouthful of syrup-soaked breakfast, "when can I see Rex again? I miss my friend." Maria looked at her daughter, this fearless, pure-hearted little girl who'd somehow managed to capture the world's attention simply by being herself, and felt tears welling up again. She'd cried more in the past 24 hours than she had in the past year. "I don't know, baby," Maria said softly, but even as she spoke, her phone lit up with a new text message. It was from a number she didn't recognize, but the message made her heart skip. "Hi, Ms. This is Officer Jake. I hope this isn't too forward, but Rex hasn't stopped looking for Emma since yesterday. Would you and Emma like to come visit the station? We could do it privately, away from all the media attention. Rex would really like to see his new friend again." Maria stared at the message for a long moment. In the background, she could hear the news playing on her neighbor's TV through the thin apartment walls, the heartwarming video that's taking the internet by storm. She thought about her own complicated history with police, about the traffic stop 5 years ago that had left her feeling humiliated and powerless. She thought about all the reasons she'd taught herself to be wary around law enforcement. But then she looked at Emma, whose face lit up with joy every time someone mentioned Rex's name, and she thought about Officer, who'd been kind and patient, and had clearly been as moved by the encounter as everyone else. Maybe, Maria thought, this was the universe giving her a chance to heal old wounds. Maybe Emma, in her innocent wisdom, was showing her mother that it was possible to approach things with an open heart, to say, "Hi, friend," even when fear told you to keep your distance. Maria picked up her phone and began typing a response. "Hi, Officer. Emma would love that. When would be a good time?" Outside her apartment window, 3 news vans were setting up in the parking lot, hopping for an interview. On social media, the video continued to spread, gathering momentum like a wildfire of hope in a world that desperately needed something to smile about. Talk show hosts were discussing it. Psychologists were analyzing it. Parents were showing it to their children as an example of bravery and kindness. And at the heart of it all was a 3-year-old girl who'd simply seen a dog and wanted to say hello to a friend. By Monday morning, the view count had hit 15 million and climbing. Maria's finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. The message to Officer was simple, just confirming that Emma would love to visit Rex, but pressing that button felt monumental. It meant opening a door she'd kept firmly closed for 5 years. It meant trusting again. She pressed send. The response came back almost immediately. "How about Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I'll make sure we have a private room away from everyone else. Just you, Emma, me, and Rex. No media, no cameras, no pressure. Promise." Maria felt something loosen in her chest. "That sounds perfect, thank you." Tuesday afternoon arrived wrapped in autumn sunshine. Maria had barely slept the night before, her mind replaying both the beautiful moment at the park and the ugly memory from 5 years ago. The traffic stop where an officer had spoken to her like she was worthless had made her feel small and afraid, had left her with a distrust of police that she'd carried like a stone in her pocket ever since. "Mama, you're driving really slow," Emma observed from her car seat as they approached the Springfield Police Department. "Are you scared?" "Out of the mouths of babes." "A little bit, sweetie," Maria admitted, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Don't be scared, Mama. We're just going to see our friend." "Our friend?" The simple certainty in Emma's voice made Maria's eyes sting with tears. When had she become the fearful one while her 3-year-old daughter led with courage? The police station was an imposing brick building that had always made Maria nervous whenever she drove past it. But today, Officer was waiting by the side entrance, and when he saw their car, he smiled and waved. Rex sat beside him, and even from the parking lot, Maria could see the dog's tail start wagging the moment Emma's door opened. "Rex!" Emma shrieked, unbuckling herself with the speed that only excited toddlers can manage. She tumbled out of the car and ran, of course she ran, straight to the German Shepherd who was already straining against Jake's hold, desperate to greet her. Maria's heart clenched, that automatic fear response kicking in, but she forced herself to breathe and trust. Trust this officer, trust this dog, trust her daughter's instincts. The reunion was magical. Rex dropped into a play-bow the moment Emma reached him, his tail wagging so hard his entire back end wiggled. Emma threw her arms around his neck, and Rex made a sound somewhere between a whine and a groan, pure contentment. It was as if they'd known each other for years rather than having met once for a few minutes. "I brought you a present," Emma announced, pulling a crumpled dog treat from her jacket pocket. It was covered in lint and had clearly been there for a while, but Rex accepted it as if she'd offered him a fillet, gently taking it from her palm with remarkable care. Jake caught Maria's eye and smiled. "I've never seen him like this," he said quietly as they walked through the side door. "Rex is usually all business. Even at home, even during downtime, he's focused and serious. But with Emma," he shook his head in wonder. "It's like she unlocked something in him I didn't know existed." They made their way through quiet hallways to a conference room that had been cleared out. Someone had thoughtfully put down a soft blanket on the floor and provided water bowls and some dog toys. It was clear Jake had gone to considerable effort to make this comfortable for everyone. "I wanted to apologize," Jake said once they were settled, Emma already on the floor with Rex, "for not calling sooner. I know the media attention has been intense. I hope this wasn't all too overwhelming." Maria watched her daughter show Rex how to play with a squeaky toy, the dog playing along with exaggerated gentleness. "It's been a lot," she admitted. "I had to unplug my phone yesterday. But honestly, officer—" "Please call me Jake." "Jake," Maria continued, and saying his first name felt like a tiny act of bravery, "I need to tell you something. 5 years ago I was pulled over by a police officer. I wasn't doing anything wrong. My tail light was out, something I didn't even know about. But the way he spoke to me, the way he made me feel," her voice cracked slightly. "I've been scared of police ever since. I know that's not fair to good officers like you, but trauma doesn't really care about fairness." Jake's expression shifted, a shadow of pain crossing his face. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. You're right, it's not fair, but your feelings are completely valid. I wish I could say that officer was an exception, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The truth is, there are officers who forget that behind every traffic stop, every interaction, there's a human being deserving of respect. That's not okay, and it never will be." The honesty in his voice, the lack of defensiveness, made something shift inside Maria. "Coming here today was hard for me," she admitted. "But Emma, she doesn't see the world the way I do. She doesn't carry the weight of bad experiences. She just sees a friend." "Maybe she's smarter than all of us," Jake said softly. Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. While Emma and Rex played, the little girl reading him a picture book she'd brought, Rex listening with rapt attention as if he understood every word, Maria and Jake talked. Really talked. Jake told her about his journey to becoming a K-9 officer, about his hopes for better community relationships, about his own moments of doubt and struggle within the system. Maria shared her story, not just the traffic stop, but her life as a single mother working at the library, her dreams for Emma's future, her fears and hopes. "You know," Jake said during a quiet moment when Emma had curled up against Rex's side, both of them drowsy and content, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the park, about what it means." "What do you think it means?" Maria asked. "I think," Jake watched Rex gently rest his chin on Emma's lap, the fierce police dog transformed into the gentlest companion. "I think we've been approaching connection all wrong. We, meaning law enforcement, we come in with authority, with power, with all these barriers up. We forget that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just say, 'Hi, friend.' No agenda, no pretense, just genuine human connection." "That's beautiful," Maria said, and she meant it. "Actually, it's given me an idea." Jake leaned forward, his eyes bright with sudden inspiration. "What if we could create something from this? Not exploit Emma's moment, God, no, but build something meaningful. A program where kids could interact with K9s in a calm, peaceful setting. Reading programs maybe at libraries. Places where children learn that police dogs aren't just weapons or tools, but friends, companions." Maria felt her heart skip. "At libraries, Jake, I work at the Central Branch. I coordinate children's programs." Their eyes met, and in that moment both of them could see it. The potential, the possibility, the way Emma's two words could ripple outward and create something lasting and beautiful. "Would your boss go for something like that?" Jake asked. "Are you kidding?" After that video went viral, our library's social media following tripled. "The director would probably build a statue of Emma if she could." Maria laughed, then grew serious. "But Jake, if we do this, it can't be a PR stunt. It has to be real. It has to actually help kids." "Agreed, completely agreed." Jake extended his hand. "Partners." Maria looked at his outstretched hand. 5 years ago, she would have recoiled. A week ago, she would have hesitated. But now, watching her daughter sleep peacefully against a police dog who'd become her best friend, watching this officer who'd shown nothing but kindness and genuine care, Maria reached out and shook his hand firmly. "Partners." Emma stirred, opening her sleepy eyes. "Mama, can Rex come to our house?" "Not yet, baby, but guess what? We're going to see him a lot more, maybe every week." Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Every week?" "Every week," Jake confirmed, grinning. "At the library. You can read to Rex, and maybe some of your friends would like to read to him too." "Yes," Emma bounced up, startling Rex, who immediately went back into play mode, tail wagging. "Rex, did you hear? We're going to be best friends every week." As Maria gathered their things to leave, Jake walked them back to their car. The autumn sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Thank you," Maria said quietly, "for today, for understanding, for being one of the good ones." Jake smiled, but there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Thank you for giving us, a chance. For being brave enough to walk through those doors even when it was hard. Emma's not the only courageous one in your family." As Maria drove away, Emma chattering excitedly about all the books she'd read to Rex, Maria glanced in her mirror. Jake and Rex stood in the parking lot, both watching them leave. Jake raised his hand in a wave, and Rex's tail was still wagging. For the first time in 5 years, Maria drove past a police station and felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Thursday morning arrived with the crisp promise of autumn, and Emma woke up before her alarm, something that had never happened in her entire 3 years of life. She bounded into Maria's bedroom at 6:47 a.m., nearly giving her mother a heart attack. Mama, is it library day? Is Rex coming? Is it time yet?" Maria groaned and pulled a pillow over her face. "Emma, sweetie, the library doesn't even open until 9, and Rex isn't coming until after lunch." "But I need to pick out my books. I need to practice reading so I can read good for Rex." There was no going back to sleep after that. By 7:30 a.m., Emma had selected 7 picture books from her bedroom shelf, rejected 4 of them, added 3 back, and was now practicing her reading voice on her stuffed animals, who were arranged in a semicircle on the living room floor. "The very hungry caterpillar," Emma read slowly, making up words when she didn't know them, "ate one. Big apple, and then he was still hungry, so he ate. A purple thing." Maria watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee cup in hand, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't quite name. 2 weeks ago, Emma had refused to sit still for story time. Now she was voluntarily practicing reading because she wanted to impress a dog. The power of motivation, Maria thought with a smile. At the Springfield Central Library, Maria's boss, Director Henderson, was nearly as excited as Emma. She'd called an emergency staff meeting the day before to discuss the new Paws and Pages program, the name Jake had suggested during one of their many planning phone calls over the past week. "This could be transformative for our community outreach," had said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We've already had 12 families call asking about it, and we haven't even officially announced it yet. The viral video gave us visibility we couldn't buy with a $1 million marketing budget." But Maria had been firm about the boundaries. "It's not about publicity," she'd insisted. "It's about helping kids, about building trust. If it becomes a media circus, Emma and I are out." Had agreed immediately. Of course, this is about the children always. Now, as 2 p.m. approached, Maria found herself straightening the children's section for the 3rd time, rearranging cushions that didn't need rearranging, repositioning the small table where Emma would sit with Rex. She'd set up a privacy screen decorated with hand-painted stars and moons to create a semi-enclosed space, visible enough that parents could observe, private enough that kids wouldn't feel like they were on display. "You're nervous," her colleague David observed, restacking nearby books. "Is it that obvious? You've been organizing that same shelf for 20 minutes. He smiled kindly. "Maria, you've seen Emma with that dog. You know it's going to be fine." Maria knew he was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were 2 different things. What if Rex acted differently in the library? What if Emma got scared? What if? The library's automatic doors whooshed open, and Maria's spiraling thoughts stopped dead. Officer Jake entered in his full uniform, and beside him, looking absolutely magnificent, was Rex. The German Shepherd wore his official police vest, but someone, probably Jake, had added a cheerful red around his neck with white letters that read "Reading Buddy." The effect on the library was immediate and electric. A mother with 2 young boys stopped mid-checkout, her mouth falling open. An elderly man reading the newspaper lowered it slowly, his eyebrows raised. 3 teenagers at the computer stations turned to stare, one of them immediately pulling out her phone before thinking better of it and putting it away. But the most dramatic reaction came from the children's section. Emma, who'd been pressed against the window watching for the past 15 minutes, released a squeal that probably violated every library quiet rule ever written. "Rex, Mama, Rex is here. He came, he really came." Before Maria could stop her, not that she would have, Emma launched herself across the children's section, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor, her pigtails flying behind her like flags. Rex's ears perked up the moment he spotted her, and his tail began its now familiar enthusiastic wagging that seemed to involve his entire body. Jake had clearly anticipated this reunion because he'd already unclipped Rex's leash. The moment he did, Rex bounded forward with surprising grace for such a large dog, meeting Emma halfway in what could only be described as a collision of pure joy. Emma wrapped her arms around Rex's neck. Rex made that contented groaning sound that had become his signature Emma greeting. They stood there, girl and dog, reunited as if they'd been separated for years rather than just 2 days. I missed you so much, Emma said into Rex's fur. I have so many books to read to you. Do you like caterpillars? This one eats a lot of food. Maria walked over to Jake, both of them watching the reunion with matching expressions of wonder. She's been talking about this nonstop since Tuesday, Maria said softly. I don't think she slept more than 4 hours last night. Rex has been the same way, Jake admitted, and Maria noticed the vulnerability in his voice. He's been restless at home, packing by the door looking for her. I've never seen him act like this about anyone. It's like, he paused, searching for words. It's like they recognized each other on some level we can't understand. They set up in the designated area. Emma arranged herself on a large floor cushion, and Rex settled beside her with his head resting on her lap, a position that shouldn't have been possible given their size difference, but somehow they made it work. Emma opened the very hungry caterpillar with great ceremony. Okay, Rex, you have to listen very carefully, she instructed seriously. This is a very important story about a caterpillar who is very, very hungry. What happened next was nothing short of magical. Emma began, reading, mostly making up the story based on the pictures, occasionally getting a word right, sometimes completely inventing plot points that definitely weren't in Carl's original text. But it didn't matter. Rex listened with complete attention, his eyes following Emma's finger as she pointed to different pictures, his ears rotating toward her voice, his tail giving occasional gentle wags of encouragement. When Emma stumbled on a word, she'd look down at Rex. What do you think this word is? She'd wait, as if Rex might actually answer, then nod decisively. You're right, it's butterfly. It was usually not butterfly. Maria watched from a few feet away, her vision blurring with tears. She kept blinking back. This was her daughter, her sometimes defiant, often wild, always fearless daughter, sitting still and focused for 25 minutes straight, sounding out words, trying so hard because she wanted to share these stories with her friend. Other children started gathering at the edges of the privacy screen, drawn by curiosity and the sight of a real police dog in their library. A 6-year-old boy with thick glasses whispered to his mother, "Is that the dog from the video? The one who's friends with the little girl?" His mother nodded and the boy's eyes went wide. "Do you think, could I maybe read to him someday too?" Jake heard this and turned to the mother with a warm smile. "That's exactly why we're here. We'll be coming every Thursday afternoon. Any child who wants to read to Rex is welcome. We want this to be for everyone." By the time Emma finished her 3rd book, a dramatic interpretation of Where the Wild Things Are, that involved Rex being declared an honorary wild thing, word had spread throughout the library, was fielding questions from parents. David was already creating a sign-up sheet. The teenagers who'd been on the computers were now watching from a distance, their usual too cool for school expressions softened into something like wonder. Emma yawned hugely, all that excitement finally catching up with her. Without a word, she curled up against Rex's side, using his flank as a pillow. Rex adjusted his position carefully, creating a comfortable space for her, then rested his chin on her shoulder. Within minutes, Emma was asleep, her breathing deep and even, one hand still clutching Where the Wild Things Are. "Should we wake her?" Jake whispered to Maria. Maria shook her head, pulling out her phone to capture the moment, not for social media, just for her own heart. Let them have this. They've both earned it. As Emma slept and Rex kept watch over her with devoted attention, something shifted in the Springfield Central Library. The usual quiet, slightly stuffy atmosphere transformed into something warmer, something more alive. Parents who'd been hurrying through their errands sat down and stayed. Children who'd been squirming and restless settled with books. Even the teenagers came closer, asking Jake quiet questions about K-9 training, about Rex's work, about how they could help with the program. Mrs., an elderly regular who'd been coming to the library for 40 years, approached Maria with tears streaming down her weathered face. "I immigrated here in 1972, she said in her accented English. "For so long I was afraid of police. Where I come from, police were dangerous, but this," She gestured to Emma and Rex, to the children gathering around, to the scene of unexpected peace and connection. "This is America I dreamed of, where little girl and big dog can be friends. Where everyone comes together. Thank you for bringing this here." Maria hugged Mrs., her own tears finally spilling over. This was bigger than she'd imagined, bigger than a cute video or a reading program. This was healing, for individuals, for families, for a community that had forgotten how to trust. Jake caught her eye from across the space and mouthed two words, "Thank you." Maria mouthed back, "No, thank you." But they both knew the truth. The real thanks belonged to a fearless 3-year-old girl who'd looked at the world without prejudice, without fear, without the weight of history and hurt, and had simply said, "Hi, friend." Emma stirred in her sleep, mumbled something that sounded like more stories, and burrowed deeper into Rex's fur. The dog's tail wagged gently, even in this moment of rest, keeping watch over his friend. And in that moment, in that library, on that Thursday afternoon, the world felt exactly as it should be. 3 months after that first library session, the Paws and Pages program had become something neither Maria nor Jake could have predicted. What started as one afternoon a week with Emma and Rex had blossomed into a full-scale community movement that was changing Springfield from the inside out. The sign-up sheet that David had created that first day now existed as a digital calendar that booked out 6 weeks in advance. 42 children from across Springfield had read to Rex. 3 other K-9 officers, inspired by Jake's example, had volunteered their dogs for the program. The library had to expand to 3 afternoons a week to accommodate demand. But the numbers, impressive as they were, didn't tell the real story. The real story was in the transformations happening quietly, one connection at a time. Like 7-year-old who had a severe stutter that made him refuse to read aloud in school. His teacher, Mrs., had referred him to speech therapy, but had shut down completely, refusing to speak in class at all. Then his mother brought him to Paws and Pages. Had been terrified at first, hiding behind his mother's legs when he saw Rex, but Emma, who'd become something of a program ambassador, had taken his hand. "Rex is really nice," she told him seriously. "He doesn't care if you mess up words, he just likes stories." That first session had whispered his way through green eggs and ham, stuttering so badly on some words that it took him 40 minutes to finish the book. Rex had never moved, never looked away, never showed the slightest impatience. When finished, Rex had licked his hand once, gently, and had smiled for the first time in months. Now, 12 weeks later, was reading chapter books to Rex and had started raising his hand in class again. His stutter hadn't disappeared, probably never would, but his fear had. Mrs. had called the library in tears, thanking them for giving her student back. Then there was the Singh family, and Singh had immigrated from India 8 years ago and had always kept their distance from local law enforcement. Not because of any bad experiences in Springfield specifically, but because where they came from, trust in police was complicated at best, dangerous at worst. They taught their 5-year-old daughter to be polite but wary, but had watched the viral video at school and begged her parents to take her to meet Rex. Reluctantly, they'd agreed to one visit, planning to stay for 15 minutes maximum and then leave. Had read Rex a story about a tiger in the jungle, reading in English but stopping occasionally to explain parts to Rex in Hindi, which Rex had seemed to find absolutely fascinating based on his attentive head tilts. When she finished, Jake had complimented her bilingual skills, and they'd ended up in a conversation about cultural traditions, about Diwali celebrations, about the Singh family's restaurant downtown that Jake had never tried but promised to visit. That had been 2 months ago. Now the Singh family came every other week, had joined the library's community advisory board. Last Tuesday, when Jake and Rex had stopped by Singh's Cuisine for dinner, had insisted they eat for free, and the entire restaurant had erupted in applause when Rex entered. The Singhs were even planning a community unity dinner to bring together families from different backgrounds, all inspired by watching their daughter read to a police dog. But perhaps the most profound change was happening in Maria herself. She'd started attending Springfield PD's community meetings, something she never would have imagined doing before. At first, she'd gone just to support Jake's proposals for expanding community programs. But then she'd found herself speaking up, sharing her own story, her own perspective as someone who'd been hurt by police interaction but who'd found a path to healing. "I'm not going to stand here and say everything is fixed," Maria had told a room full of officers and community members at a particularly tense meeting about police accountability. "I still carry the memory of that traffic stop. I still tense up sometimes when I see a patrol car. Trauma doesn't just disappear because one good thing happened." The room had gone silent. Jake, sitting in the back, had held his breath. But Maria continued, her voice stronger. "I've learned that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, one honest conversation at a time. My daughter taught me that. Officer taught me that. And maybe if we're willing to be vulnerable, to admit when we've been hurt and when we've caused hurt, we can find a way forward together." She'd received a standing ovation. 3 officers had privately apologized for the culture that had allowed her traumatic traffic stop to happen. The chief had asked her to help develop new training protocols centered on dignity and respect. Maria, who'd spent 5 years avoiding anything police-related, was now helping to reshape how Springfield officers interacted with the community. Jake, meanwhile, was experiencing his own transformation. He'd always been a good cop, fair, professional, dedicated. But he'd also been somewhat rigid, following protocols without always questioning whether those protocols served the community's best interests. Emma and Rex's friendship had cracked something open in him, made him think differently about what protecting and serving really meant. He'd started a mentorship program pairing veteran officers with community members for monthly coffee conversations. No agenda, no official business, just relationship building. He'd advocated successfully for additional bias training. He'd pushed for more transparency in department operations. Some of his fellow officers thought he was going soft. Others quietly thanked him for giving voice to changes they'd wanted to see for years. Sargent, who'd initially been skeptical of the whole Paws and Pages idea, had become one of its biggest supporters. "I've been a cop for 28 years, he'd told Jake last week, "and I've never seen anything change community perception like this program has. You and that dog are doing more for police-community relations than 100 press conferences could do." The program's success had attracted attention beyond Springfield. The Ohio Police Chiefs Association had invited Jake to present at their annual conference. 3 other cities were developing similar programs. A documentary filmmaker had reached out about doing a short film. The local newspaper was running a series called Bridging Divides, featuring stories from program participants. But on Thursday afternoons, when Jake brought Rex to the library, none of the external attention mattered. What mattered was the sight of children gathered on colorful cushions, reading their hearts out to patient dogs. What mattered was watching parents who'd never spoken to police officers before asking Jake about his day, sharing photos of their kids, inviting him to school events and birthday parties. What mattered was Emma, now almost 4 years old, who'd become the program's unofficial greeter. She'd welcome each new child with the same fearlessness she'd shown that first day, telling them, "Rex is the best listener in the whole world. He won't judge you if you don't know a word. He's our friend. Our friend, not my friend or a friend, but our friend." Somehow Emma understood that Rex, and by extension this whole program, belonged to everyone. One afternoon, a new family arrived, the Washingtons. Washington was a 14-year-old who'd been caught up in a shoplifting incident 3 months earlier. His mother was a single mom working 2 jobs, exhausted and frustrated, not knowing how to reach her increasingly angry son. The juvenile court judge had recommended counseling, community service, and positive interactions with law enforcement. had seen the Paws and Pages flyer at the courthouse and had dragged a reluctant to the library. "This is stupid," had muttered. "I'm not reading to some cop's dog." But Emma had overheard. She'd walked right up to this teenager who was more than twice her height and looked up at him with complete seriousness. "Rex doesn't care if you're mad," she'd said. "He just likes when people read to him. It makes him happy. Don't you want to make him happy?" Something in his defensive expression had cracked. He'd looked down at this tiny kid with pigtails and then over at Rex, who was watching him with calm, non-judgmental eyes. "What am I supposed to read?" he'd asked. "Anything you want," Jake had said quietly. "We have everything from picture books to novels, whatever speaks to you." Had chosen The Outsiders, a book about kids who didn't fit in, who struggled with society's expectations, who were more than their mistakes. He'd read the first chapter haltingly, self-consciously, waiting for judgment that never came. Rex had simply listened, his presence steady and accepting. When the hour was over, hadn't wanted to leave. Can I come back next week?" he'd asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the hope in his voice. "Every Thursday," Jake had confirmed. "Rex will be waiting." As and left, the teenager's defensive slouch had straightened slightly, had stopped at the door, turned back to Jake with tears in her eyes and simply mouthed, "Thank you." Walking to his car that evening, Rex trotting contentedly beside him, Jake thought about how far they'd all come. 3 months ago, he'd been just another K-9 officer doing demonstrations and drug searches. Now he was part of something that was actually changing lives, actually healing wounds, actually building the kind of community he dreamed about when he first put on the badge. His phone buzzed. A text from Maria, 17 new sign-ups this week. We're going to need more dogs and more time slots. Also, Mrs. wants to donate $5,000 to expand the program. Jake, what have we started? Jake smiled, scratching Rex behind the ears. The dog looked up at him with those intelligent brown eyes, and Jake could have sworn Rex understood exactly what they'd accomplished together. He texted back, "Something beautiful, we've started something beautiful." And it had all begun with 2 words from a fearless 3-year-old girl who'd seen a friend where others saw only fear. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early December, and it shattered Jake's world in an instant. He was at the station, finishing paperwork from an overnight shift, when his phone lit up with Maria's number. He smiled. They talked most days now, coordinating program schedules, sharing stories about Rex and Emma, sometimes just chatting about life. He answered cheerfully. "Hey Maria, what's?" "Jake," her voice stopped him cold. It was flat, hollow, empty in a way he'd never heard before. "It's Emma. We're at Springfield General Hospital. They found something, a mass. They're saying..." Her voice cracked completely. "They're saying she needs surgery immediately. They're saying it could be, Jake, I can't lose her." The phone nearly slipped from his hand. Emma, sweet, fearless, brilliant Emma who changed everything. No, this couldn't be happening. "I'm coming right now. Which floor?" "Pediatric wing, 4th floor. But Jake, you don't have to." "I'm already leaving." He made the drive to Springfield General in 7 minutes, probably breaking a dozen traffic laws, but he didn't care. His mind kept replaying moments. Emma's laugh, her small hand on Rex's nose, the way she declared him our friend with such absolute certainty. The thought of anything happening to that little girl made his chest feel like it was being crushed in a vice. He found Maria in the pediatric waiting area, and the sight of her nearly broke him. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the hours since he'd last seen her. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hands shaking as she gripped a crumpled tissue. "They're running tests," she said when Jake sat beside her. "They found a mass near her kidney. They won't know if it's malignant until they operate, but they need to remove it either way. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning." She turned to look at Jake, and the raw terror in her eyes was almost unbearable. "She's so scared, Jake. She won't stop crying. She's never been in a hospital overnight before. She doesn't understand why she can't go home." Can I see her? Maria nodded, standing on shaky legs. She keeps asking for Rex, she thinks. She thinks if Rex was here, she wouldn't be scared anymore. They walked through sterile hallways that smelled of antiseptic and fear, past rooms where other children fought their own battles, until they reached Emma's room. Through the small window in the door, Jake could see her, tiny in the hospital bed, dwarfed by white sheets and monitoring equipment, her face blotchy from crying. The moment they entered, Emma's tear-streaked face turned toward them. "Mama, I want to go home. I don't like it here. When can I see Rex? Can Rex come now?" Maria's face crumpled, but she forced a smile. "Baby, Rex can't come to hospitals. It's against the rules." "But why?" Emma's voice rose in pitch, panic creeping in. "I need him, Mama. I'm scared. I want my friend." She dissolved into sobs again, and Maria rushed to her bedside, gathering her daughter into her arms while trying not to disturb the IV line in Emma's small hand. Jake stood frozen in the doorway, his heart shattering into pieces. A nurse entered to check Emma's vitals, her expression sympathetic but helpless. "We gave her something to help her relax," she said quietly to Maria, "but the anxiety is overriding it. Is there anything that usually calms her? A favorite toy or blanket?" "She has her stuffed dog," Maria said, "but it's not the same she wants." She looked up at Jake and he saw the desperate hope in her eyes. "She wants Rex." The nurse glanced at Jake's uniform, seeming to notice him for the first time. "You're a police officer." "K-9 unit," Jake confirmed. "Rex is my partner. He and Emma are. They're very close." The nurse's expression softened. "I've heard about the reading program. My niece participates." She looked at Emma, still sobbing in Maria's arms, then back at Jake. "Therapy animals aren't supposed to visit pediatric patients due to infection control protocols, but—" She paused, making a decision. "Let me talk to doctor. If it's a registered service animal and proper sanitization protocols are followed, maybe there's a way." Hope flared in Jake's chest, but he tried to temper it. "Rex is a working K-9, fully certified and vaccinated for public interaction. If there's any way—" "Let me see what I can do." The next 2 hours were excruciating. Maria tried everything to calm Emma, reading stories, singing songs, playing videos on her phone, but nothing worked. Emma just kept crying for Rex, eventually exhausting herself into a fitful sleep punctuated by whimpers and the word friend repeated over and over. Jake sat in the hallway making phone calls, first to Sergeant explaining the situation. "I know it's completely against protocol," Jake said, "but this little girl, she's the reason our community program exists. She's the reason we've rebuilt trust with dozens of families, and she's terrified. If there's any way—" "Bring Rex," interrupted. "I'll handle the paperwork, just bring him." Next, Jake called the hospital administrator, who initially said absolutely not, then spoke with doctor, then called him back 15 minutes later with grudging approval. "Strict conditions," she warned. "The dog must be bathed with antimicrobial shampoo. He must wear hospital booties. The visit must be short, no more than 30 minutes. And officer, if anything goes wrong, this is on you." "Understood. Thank you so much." Jake drove home at speeds he'd never admit to, gave Rex the most thorough bath of his life using special veterinary antimicrobial soap, and drove back to the hospital with his partner, who seemed to sense something important was happening. Rex sat perfectly still in the car, his eyes alert, his usual excitement replaced by a strange, calm focus. At the hospital, a nurse met them with paper booties for Rex's paws and strict instructions. "Room 447, 30 minutes maximum. And officer, that little girl is lucky to have friends like you and this dog." Emma was awake when they arrived, lying listlessly in bed, staring at the ceiling with dead eyes that looked wrong on a child so young. Maria was beside her, holding her hand, singing a Spanish lullaby in a broken voice. Jake knocked softly on the door frame. "Emma, someone's here to see you." Emma didn't respond at first. Then Rex poked his head around the door frame, and everything changed. Rex, Emma's scream of joy probably violated every hospital quiet policy, but nobody came to stop them. She tried to sit up, got tangled in her IV line, didn't care. Rex, Rex, you came. Mama, Rex is here. Jake quickly helped Rex navigate around the medical equipment, and then the German Shepherd was beside Emma's bed, his tail wagging so hard it thumped against the wall. He rose up on his hind legs carefully, resting his front paws on the edge of the bed, bringing his face level with Emma's. Emma threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur, and for the first time in hours she stopped crying. "You came," she whispered. "I knew you'd come. You're my best friend." Rex made that special sound, the groan whine of contentment he reserved only for Emma, and gently licked her cheek. Maria covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face, but these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of witnessing something miraculous. "Can he stay with me?" Emma asked, looking up at Jake with such hope it physically hurt. "Just for a little while," Jake said gently, "but he wanted to make sure you know he's thinking about you. And tomorrow, when you have your surgery, Rex and I will be right here waiting for you to wake up. We'll be the first thing you see. Deal?" "Deal," Emma said, already looking drowsy, the anxiety that had kept her wired for hours finally releasing its grip. "Rex, will you lie down with me?" Following Jake's signal, Rex carefully climbed onto the hospital bed, something he'd never done before, something that was definitely against both hospital and K9 protocol, but nobody was going to stop them now. He positioned himself carefully along Emma's side, avoiding her IV, creating a warm, solid presence. Emma curled into him, one small hand gripping his fur, and within minutes she was asleep. Real sleep, peaceful sleep, her breathing deep and even, her face finally relaxed. The nurse who'd first helped them appeared in the doorway, took in the scene, and smiled. 30 minutes, you said. Take an hour, she needs this." For that hour, Jake and Maria sat side by side in chairs pulled close to the bed, watching Emma sleep with Rex. They didn't talk much. What was there to say, but at one point Maria reached over and took Jake's hand, squeezing it tight. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to," Jake replied. "Emma taught us about friendship. We're just returning the favor." When the hour was up, Jake had to carefully wake Emma to say goodbye. She cried again, but these tears were different, sad but not panicked, disappointed but not terrified. "Rex has to go back to work," Jake explained, "but tomorrow after your surgery we'll come back, I promise." Emma nodded bravely. "Okay, tell Rex I love him." "I think he already knows." The surgery was scheduled for 6 a.m. Jake and Rex were in the waiting room by 5:30, both of them having barely slept. Maria emerged from the pre-op area looking like a ghost, and Jake bought her terrible hospital coffee that she didn't drink but held like a lifeline. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of packing, of praying, of Jake teaching Rex to shake hands just to have something to do. 4 hours of Maria alternating between silent tears and forced conversation about nothing. Finally, Doctor emerged, still in scrubs, and the smile on her face told them everything before she said a word. "The mass was benign. We removed it completely. Emma's going to be fine." Maria collapsed into Jake's arms, sobbing with relief so profound it shook her entire body. Jake held her, his own eyes wet, murmuring, she's okay, she's going to be okay." When Emma woke up in recovery, groggy and confused, the first thing she saw was Rex's face close to hers. The dog had been granted special permission to be in the recovery room, unprecedented, probably against 100 rules, but nobody was going to tell this little girl no after what she'd been through. "Hi, friend," Emma whispered, echoing those first words she'd ever spoken to him. Rex's tail wagged gently, and he licked her hand once softly. Emma smiled, closed her eyes, and fell back asleep holding onto her best friend's paw. In that moment, In that recovery room, surrounded by medical equipment and antiseptic smell, there was nothing but love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog. A bond that had not only changed them but had transformed an entire community. 5 years later, October 2030, Emma stood at the podium in Memorial Park, and if you didn't know her story, you'd think she was just another confident 8-year-old preparing to give a speech. But Jake knew better. He could still see traces of that fearless 3-year-old who'd changed his life, in the determined set of her jaw, in the way she wasn't nervous at all despite the 200 people gathered before her, in how she reached down to touch Rex's graying muzzle before she began speaking. Rex sat beside her on the stage, now 9 years old and officially retired from active police duty. His face had gone silver around the eyes and snout, his movements slower and more careful than they used to be. But when he looked at Emma, his eyes held the same devoted attention they'd had that very first day. "Good afternoon, everyone," Emma began, her voice clear and strong through the microphone. "My name is Emma, and I want to tell you about my best friend." The crowd quieted instantly. Maria stood in the front row, tears already streaming down her face, happy tears this time, proud tears. Beside her stood Jake's wife, Sarah, whom he'd married 2 years ago in a ceremony where both Emma and Rex had served as attendants. Sarah squeezed Maria's hand, both women knowing how far they'd all come. "5 years ago," Emma continued, "I was 3 years old and I did something my mama still says was either very brave or very crazy." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. "I ran up to a police dog named Rex without asking permission. Everyone thought something bad would happen, but I looked at Rex and I didn't see something scary. I just saw a friend." Emma paused, looking down at Rex, who gazed back at her with pure love. "I said 2 words, 'Hi, friend,' and Rex's whole body changed. His tail wagged, he let me pet him, he let me hug him, and from that day on we've been best friends." In the crowd sat with his family. Now 12 years old, he'd become one of Paws and Paige's student volunteers, helping younger kids learn to read to the K9s. His stutter was manageable now, but more importantly, his confidence was unshakable. He credited Rex and Emma for showing him that his voice mattered, even when the words didn't come easy. "But this story isn't just about me and Rex," Emma said, her voice taking on a more serious tone that belied her young age. "It's about what happens when we choose kindness over fear. When we say, 'Hi, friend,' instead of running away or judging or being scared of things that are different from us." The Singh family sat together in the 3rd row, and now 10 years old. Beside them were the Washingtons. Was 19 now, a sophomore at Ohio State University studying criminal justice. He wanted to be a K9 officer himself someday. He told Jake last week that if a little girl and a dog could change his entire life trajectory, maybe he could do the same for other kids who felt lost and angry like he once had. "Because of Rex, I learned to love reading," Emma continued. "Because of Rex, my mama found healing from something that hurt her for a long time. Because of Rex, officer," she gestured to Jake, who felt his throat tighten with emotion, "started a program that's helped hundreds of kids in our community. Kids who were scared, kids who couldn't read, kids who didn't trust police officers, kids who just needed a friend." Henderson, the library director, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The Paws and Paige's program had expanded beyond anyone's dreams. It now operated in 47 libraries across Ohio, with 6 more states developing their own versions. They'd won state and national awards. They'd been featured in documentaries, news articles, and academic studies about community police relations. But more than any of that, they'd touched lives, real, individual, precious lives. "Today is the 5th annual Community Safety Day," Emma said, "and today is also special because it's Rex's retirement party." The crowd erupted in applause, and Rex's tail thumped against the stage floor. "Rex has worked as a police dog for 8 years. He's helped find missing people, kept our community safe, and taught me and hundreds of other kids that police officers and police dogs aren't scary. They're friends who protect us and care about us." Sergeant sat in the back row, no longer a sergeant but now chief, having been promoted 2 years ago largely due to the department's improved community relations. Under his leadership, Springfield PD had become a model for community policing. Their complaint numbers were down 67%. Community trust surveys showed unprecedented approval ratings, and it had all started with a 3-year-old girl and a German shepherd. "Rex taught me something really important," Emma said, her voice softening. "He taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. Being brave means choosing to be kind even when you don't know what will happen. It means giving someone, or some dog, a chance before you decide they're not your friend." In the crowd, Mrs. sat with 3 generations of her family, children, and who'd all been born in America, who'd all participated in Paws and Pages at some point, who'd all learned that their grandmother's fears didn't have to become their own. Mrs. had donated over $50,000 to the program over the years, funding expansion to neighborhoods and providing books for children who couldn't afford them. "Some people ask me if I was scared that day," Emma said. "And honestly, I don't really remember being scared. I just remember seeing Rex and thinking he looked like he needed a friend. Maybe he looked lonely. Maybe I looked lonely too. Maybe that's what friendship is, 2 people, or a person and a dog, recognizing something in each other and deciding to take a chance." Jake felt Sarah's hand slip into his. He glanced at her, saw her smiling through tears, and squeezed back. They'd talked about starting a family soon, and when they did, he hoped their children would have even a fraction of Emma's courage and wisdom. "Today, Rex is retiring from police work," Emma said, "but he's not retiring from being my friend. He's not retiring from the reading program. He's not retiring from visiting kids at the hospital." Her voice caught slightly on that word, remembering her own hospital stay, how Rex had saved her from her fear, or from going to schools or helping kids who are scared or sad or just need someone to listen to them read. The crowd again, louder this time. Emma waited for them to quiet down, then delivered the final part of her speech, the part she and Maria had practiced all week. "I'm 8 years old now, and I've learned a lot in the past 5 years. I've learned that grown-ups are scared of things too, even if they don't always show it. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is just say hello. I've learned that trust has to be built slowly, one moment at a time, one person at a time. And I've learned that change doesn't happen because of one big thing. It happens because of lots of little moments of kindness adding up." Maria was openly crying now, as were at least 30 other people in the crowd. Even some of the police officers standing at the edges of the gathering weren't bothering to hide their emotions. "So here's what I want everyone to take away from today," Emma said, standing a little, channeling confidence that 3-year-old Emma had possessed, but 8-year-old Emma had learned to understand and articulate. "When you see someone different from you, someone who maybe scares you a little bit, someone you don't understand, try saying, 'Hi, friend.' Just those 2 words. See what happens. You might be surprised." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "My teacher, Mrs. Wilson, taught us that one small act of kindness can create ripples that go on forever. I think she's right. I said 2 words to a dog, and those words created ripples that touched hundreds of people. Imagine what could happen if all of us, every single day, chose kindness, chose to say, 'Hi, friend,' to the world." Emma looked down at Rex one more time, then back at the audience. "Thank you for being here today to celebrate my best friend. Thank you for supporting Paws and Pages. And thank you for being part of a community that believes in second chances, in healing, and in friendship. Rex might be retiring, but his legacy, our legacy, will keep going. Because once you learn to see friends instead of strangers, you can't unsee it." The crowd rose to its feet, applauding so loudly that several dogs in the K9 demonstration area started barking in excitement. Emma stepped back from the microphone and knelt down, wrapping her arms around Rex's neck the same way she had 5 years ago. Rex leaned into her embrace, his tail wagging with that same joy, that same recognition, that same pure love. Jake stepped forward to the microphone as the applause continued. "Thank you, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I can speak for everyone here when I say that Rex and I are the lucky ones. You taught us to be brave. You taught us to lead with love. And you showed an entire community that change is possible when we approach each other with open hearts." Later that afternoon, after the ceremonies ended and the crowds dispersed, Jake and Maria sat on a park bench while Emma and Rex played on the grass. A slower, gentler version of play now, but no less joyful. Sarah had taken Rex's official retirement certificate to frame, and the autumn sun painted everything in shades of gold. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Maria asked quietly. "How terrified I was when Emma ran toward Rex." "Every single day," Jake admitted. "I think about how close we came to pulling them apart, how close we came to letting fear win." "But we didn't," Maria said softly. "Emma didn't let us. She knew something we'd forgotten, that connection is always possible if we're brave enough to try." They watched as Emma threw a tennis ball a short distance and Rex ambled after it, bringing it back with dignified patience. This was their routine now, had been for 5 years, would be for however many years they had left together. "I got the results back from the oncology checkup," Maria said suddenly, and Jake's head whipped toward her in alarm. But she was smiling. 5 years cancer-free, Emma's completely healthy. They're calling her a miracle case. Jake exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That's incredible, Maria. That's God, that's the best news." "I know," Maria wiped at her eyes. "Sometimes I think about what we would have lost if things had gone differently. Not just Emma, though that would have destroyed me, but all of this. This community we've built. These relationships. This proof that people can change, that trust can be rebuilt, that love is stronger than fear." Emma's laugh rang across the park, pure and bright, as Rex successfully retrieved the ball and delivered it to her feet. She praised him like he'd accomplished an Olympic feat, and his tail wagged with pride. "They're going to grow old together," Jake observed. "Emma growing up, Rex growing old. It seems right somehow." "Everything about this seems right," Maria agreed. "Even the hard parts, even the scary parts, it all led us here." As the sun began to set over Memorial Park, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Emma ran back to the bench with Rex trotting beside her. She was breathless and grinning, still young enough to find pure joy in simple moments. "That was a really good speech today, sweetie," Maria said, pulling her daughter close. "Rex helped me write it," Emma said seriously. "I asked him what he thought I should say, and he gave me ideas." Jake smiled. "Is that so? What did Rex tell you?" Emma looked up at him with those wise eyes that had seen more in 8 years than some people saw in a lifetime. "He said to always choose love, to always say hi, to always be a friend. That's all anyone really needs to know." Simple wisdom from a simple moment, 5 years ago, when a fearless little girl had looked at a German shepherd and seen not a threat, not a tool, not even really a police dog, just a friend waiting to be discovered. Those 2 words, hi, friend, had changed everything. And as long as people remembered that moment, as long as they continued to choose connection over fear, the ripples would go on forever. Just like Emma said, one small act of kindness, creating waves that would never stop spreading. The end.